Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvijavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Om, may we be protected and nourished. May we work together with great strength. May our study be fruitful and enlightening. Let there be no quarrels among us. Om, peace, peace, peace. Namaskar. Welcome to the Interfaith University's introductory online study program in Practical Vedanta. I'm Dr. Patrick Horn, an initiated disciple in the spiritual lineage founded by Swami Vivekananda. This 10-part course explores the global history, core concepts, key texts, essential practices, and influential personalities of this ancient sacred philosophy. The topic for this session is the history of Vedanta in the East. We will look at a timeline to learn about the development of this philosophy in the Indian cultural context. We'll also learn about the composition of the oldest scriptures of the world, the Vedas, with an introduction to the mythology and the key figures of the classical schools. About 50 million years ago, a fast-moving triangular piece of land broke off from the southeastern coast of Africa and drifted across the Indian Ocean, smashing into Central Asia with such force that it pushed the Earth 5 miles up into the sky to form the Himalayan mountains and became the Indian subcontinent. More recently, around 8,000 years ago in present-day Pakistan, agriculture begins in the Indus River Valley, leading to one of the oldest urban settlements in the world. Hindu is the word used by the Greeks, Persians, and Arabs for everybody who lived in this northwestern semi-arid plain, much like the Tigris, Euphrates, and Nile. This Neolithic civilization eventually extended to more than 1,000 sites with advanced water and drainage system and trade partners as far away as Sumer, Crete, and Egypt. They had wheat and barley storage, gold, copper, lead, and bronze tools and weapons. Their homes were constructed from sun-baked and kiln-fired bricks, and they imported silver, tin, and lapis lazuli. Nobody knows how it ended. Perhaps there was an invasion or migration of foreigners on horses 4,000 years ago. Nomads in the Punjab region transmitted the Vedas orally from father to son and through lineages, schools, and branches organized around different commentaries. There was meticulous accuracy and memorization through a number of techniques, including chanting as a group and physical movements and gestures. These people called themselves Arya, meaning noble or honorable, a term like the swastika, later grotesquely distorted by the Nazis. Vedic society was divided into 4 castes of priests, warriors, farmers, and servants. The Vedic rituals included ingestion of a hallucinogenic plant called soma, taken in a small quantity in a controlled context. The people gradually moved southward. Around 2,500 years ago, a reform movement led by Siddhartha Gautama, known as the Buddha, offered an alternative path within the Vedic tradition and eventually developed along its own lines in Southeastern Asia, China, and Japan. Meanwhile, the epic age around 2,000 years ago included the composition of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, and the building of temples and progress in arts, science, and philosophy in the classical period ending 1,500 years ago. The Vedic tradition stagnated in the Islamic conquests of the 12th to 16th century, followed by a revival and renaissance during British colonial rule in the 18th to 20th centuries. Modern independence was established in 1947, but the country was politically divided and partitioned into Pakistan, which is bordering Afghanistan, Persia, and part of the Arab Peninsula here, Tibet, China, and Bangladesh, which was once called East Pakistan, bordering Bhutan and Myanmar. What is Vedanta? Vedanta means the end of knowledge or the goal of wisdom. This definition has a literal and figurative meaning, as well as a secondary meaning. First, Vedanta is based on the Upanishads, which are literally the end of the Vedas, which are the oldest scriptures in the world, transmitted orally for generations as poetry before the teachings were transferred to writing. Veda is from the root vid, meaning to know. Veda is etymologically related to the Latin word video, I see, and also the English word wit or intelligence. It is best translated as knowledge, or more specifically, wisdom. Vedanta is not merely abstract speculation, but the aim of human life. Realization of the existence of God, called Brahman, is beyond intellect, more than an idealistic concept. It is a fact that can be directly experienced under the right conditions and does not contradict reason. Finally, Vedanta also refers to a genre of literature that explains, expands, and comments upon this teaching and perception. The revelation to the rishis was transmitted orally as metrical poetry for generations before it was transferred to writing in 4 divisions. The Rig Veda is the oldest and consists of hymns and ritual prescriptions to invoke various gods. There are also lessons on cosmology and instructions for correct recitation, curing diseases, ensuring prosperity, and other ceremonial magic. These 4 Vedas are the foundational text of Hinduism, or the Sanatana Dharma, and they continued to be studied, revered, and chanted to this day. Hinduism is a term used to describe a diverse set of teachings, mythology, and sects that has been also called the Sanatana Dharma, or eternal law. It emphasizes the unity of all existence, which is called Brahman, and the pursuit of spiritual enlightenment through various paths. It is based on the oldest scriptures of the world, the Vedas, which were revealed to rishis more than 4,000 years ago. Swami Vivekananda said, "Their authors were poets. These ancient rishis, seers of truth, were raised above humanity to show these truths through poetry. The entire philosophy can be described from the verse, Ekam Sat Vipra Prabhuta Vedanti, which means the truth is one. Sages call it by various names. In other words, there is an unchanging, ineffable truth, which is described through different metaphors and symbols. For example, one person says water and another says agua, and both words describe the same thing. The description isn't the thing itself. And if we fight about the words, we aren't taking the drink that will quench our thirst. The analogy of water is often used by rishis. There are different categories of rishis, or enlightened poets. For example, the philosopher king, Rajrishi, governors who embody not only political power, but also deep spiritual insight. Maharishis are spiritual teachers and gurus who guide seekers on their spiritual journeys. They impart knowledge of scriptures, meditation, and other spiritual practices. Renowned figures like Vyasa, who compiled the Mahabharata and classified the Vedas, are considered Maharishis. Brahmarishis are individuals who attained self-realization, and often they continue to guide and inspire others even after attaining liberation. Devarishis are the counselors to the immortals. They're highly advanced spiritual beings, often associated with heavenly realms or celestial deities. They act as advisors or counselors to divine entities and are considered divine themselves. Narada, a sage known for his diplomacy among the gods and musical talents, is a Devarishi. The Saptarishis are 7 ancient sages created directly by Lord Brahma, the creator of the universe. They are depicted as the bearers of divine knowledge and the architects of various aspects of creation. The terms Brahman and Lord Brahma are distinct concepts and refer to different aspects of the religious and philosophical tradition. Brahman describes the ultimate, formless, and unchanging reality or cosmic consciousness that underlies and pervades the entire universe. Brahman is the source and essence of all existence. It is beyond attributes, qualities, and limitations, and is often described as being both immanent, present within everything, and also transcendent, beyond everything. The realization of one's essential unity with Brahman is a central goal in Vedanta. Achieving this realization is known as moksha, or liberation. Brahman is not a personal deity. A chosen ideal, or Ishtadeva, helps individuals establish a tangible connection to the impersonal God, or Brahman, on a human level. Pratima in Sanskrit refers to an image, icon, or representation of a deity. These physical representations are used in worship and rituals to stimulate a devotee's imagination and intuitive intelligence. Lord Brahma is an aspect of the allegorical Hindu trinity, known as the Trimurti. He is a personal god, a mythological deity referred to as the creator. He does not have an active role in the preservation or destruction of the universe. There is no explanation for why he created the universe, perhaps as play or a moral gymnasium. Some say that he was lonely and divided himself like cellular mitosis, or perhaps he was born from the cosmic egg Hiranyagarbha, which blossomed into a lotus floating on the ocean. He is typically depicted with four faces, symbolizing his omniscient knowledge. He is also depicted with four arms, holding a variety of symbolic objects, including a rosary or mala, symbolizing time, and a book, the Vedas. He is infatuated with his wife, Saraswati, who is an inspiration to musicians, artists, scholars, and seekers of wisdom. Their relationship represents the union of knowledge and creativity. Vishnu is the preserver deity in the allegorical Hindu Trimurti, and he is associated with virtues like compassion and duty. His wife, Lakshmi, is the goddess of good fortune. She is also associated with beauty, grace, and abundance. She was born when Vishnu and other deities churned the ocean to obtain the nectar of immortality. Vishnu incarnates in various forms to restore cosmic order and protect the Dharma. His 10 avatars include the fish, the tortoise, the boar, the half-man, half-lion, the dwarf priest, the warrior with an axe, Rama, the prince whose life was chronicled in the Ramayana, Krishna, who advised the warrior Arjuna in the Kurukshetra war, which is narrated in the Mahabharata, and whose life and teachings is recorded in the Puranas and the Bhagavad Gita. His 9th incarnation was Buddha, and he will incarnate in the future as the rider on a white horse. Shiva is the personification of the destructive or transformative aspect of the allegorical Hindu Trimurti. When the churning of the ocean produced poison, he swallowed it to save the world. He is associated with the moon, which is depicted on his head, and he is often adorned with serpents, which symbolizes his freedom from fear and spiritual insight. He is often represented in meditation atop of Mount Kailash in the Himalayas, which suggests his ascetic detachment from worldly desires. He is married to Parvati, who is the incarnation of love and devotion. She created a son, Ganesh, from sandalwood paste to stand guard outside her chamber to ensure her privacy while bathing. He was extremely loyal, and when Shiva returned from long austerities and they did not recognize each other, they engaged in a battle which ended with Ganesh's beheading. Parvati was heartbroken and furious, and her grief was overwhelming. Shiva promised to bring Ganesh back to life, reviving him with an elephant head that he found nearby in the forest. Ganesh is revered as a patron of scribes, the remover of obstacles, the provider of security and prosperity, and a guardian of threshold crossings. Parvati is also closely associated with the protective forms of the divine, such as Durga and Kali, when she assumes these aspects to fulfill specific cosmic roles. These goddesses are interconnected and represent different facets of the divine feminine within Hinduism. Durga is a fierce and powerful goddess who represents the Divine Mother's warrior aspect. She is often depicted riding a lion or tiger and wielding various weapons, symbolizing her courage and strength. Durga is invoked to combat and vanquish demons. Her most famous myth involves her slaying Mahishasura, symbolizing the triumph of good over evil. Kali is an even more ferocious and formidable form of the goddess, often depicted with a garland of skulls and a severed head in her hand. She represents the destructive aspect of the divine and is associated with time and transformation. Kali is invoked to destroy false identity, ignorance, and attachment, leading to spiritual liberation. Hindu cosmology describes an infinite series of cycles of creation, preservation, and destruction of the universe, known as the kalpa. Each period is followed by emptiness and rest. This concept is intricately connected to the idea of samsara, the process of death and rebirth, and the four yugas, or cosmic ages. While the universe goes through these cycles, sentient beings, including humans, undergo a parallel process of suffering and rebirth in samsara. The actions or karma of an individual in one life influence their future births in various life forms. This transmigration through samsara continues until an individual achieves liberation, moksha, and escapes the cycle of death and rebirth. Within each kalpa, there are four yugas, which represent distinct cosmic ages, each with its own moral and spiritual characteristics. These yugas follow a cyclical pattern within the kalpa, reflecting the rising and falling moral and spiritual standards of humanity as the universe evolves. As the kalpa progresses, the yugas gradually decline from the highest to the lowest moral qualities. The first yuga, the Satya Yuga, is characterized by truth, righteousness, and spiritual enlightenment. It represents the peak of human virtue. In the Treta Yuga, morality and divine wisdom gradually decline, and elaborate ceremonial rituals and sacrifices become more prominent. In the Dvapara Yuga, there is further physical and mental degeneration until the fourth and final Kali Yuga, characterized by widespread ignorance, greed, dishonesty, and corruption. Individuals born in different yugas face different levels of moral and spiritual challenges with different virtues and duties, which influence their actions and karma, and thus their future births in samsara. The goal for individuals is to use each yuga as an opportunity for spiritual growth and ultimately attain liberation from samsara, regardless of the yuga when they are born. The yugas serve as the backdrop for the moral and spiritual development of humanity within the ever-revolving cycles of the universe, with the ultimate aim of transcending samsara and achieving moksha. The collection of texts known as the Upanishads are the Vedanta, literally the end of the Vedas, the appendix of philosophical teachings and insights into the nature of reality and the ultimate goal of spiritual liberation, known as moksha. The Upanishads emphasize the idea that the ultimate reality, often referred to as Brahman, is identical to one's innermost self, known as Atman. The realization that Atman is Brahman is essential to the Vedanta. The Upanishads teach that the individual soul, Atman, is not separate from the universal consciousness, Brahman. This knowledge is considered the key to attaining liberation and reaching a state of eternal bliss, perfect knowledge, and freedom from suffering. The term Upanishad is derived from the Sanskrit words upa, near, ni, down, and shad, to sit, which together mean sitting down near or sitting down at the feet of a teacher. This suggests the idea of a student sitting in close proximity to a spiritual teacher to receive esoteric or secret teachings. The Upanishads are considered esoteric or secret because they contain profound knowledge about the nature of reality and the ultimate goal of spiritual liberation, lessons that were traditionally passed down from teacher to student. There were no monasteries or temples in the ancient Vedic religion. Upon reaching adolescence, a student would leave his family to live with a teacher, typically a retired householder, well-read in the scriptures, and free from immoderate lust and greed. At age 25, the graduating student would join the ancestral business, marry, and raise children. It was socially unacceptable to become a wandering beggar or a solitary renunciate. However, a few preferred an ascetic lifestyle, and sometimes groups united around common discipline and ideals. Giving shelter to bands of mendicants during the rainy season was a Buddhist innovation that led to schools and religious communities with vows. The construction of temples toward the end of the Puranic period gave rise to priestly sects. The various lineages were later integrated in a structure devised by Adi Shankaracharya, who wrote commentaries on 10 of the extant 108 Upanishads. The Upanishads distinguish between lower knowledge of the world and higher knowledge that is necessary in the pursuit of spiritual realization. There is a story in the Chandogya Upanishad of Satyakama, which illustrates the importance of truth, purity of heart, and sincerity in the quest for spiritual knowledge and realization. It underscores the idea that one's familial lineage or social status is not a barrier to attaining wisdom and understanding the ultimate truth, which is accessible to all spiritual seekers. There is also a famous dialogue between a father and his ignorant and proud son, Svetaketu. The father questions whether the learned young man knows that which enables one to hear what cannot be heard, to perceive what cannot be perceived, and to know what cannot be known. He compares Brahman to gold and clay. Knowledge of a nugget of gold or clod of clay gives knowledge of gold or clay in all forms. He teaches that as heat causes sweat, so did Brahman become water, then food, then mind, then speech. He breaks the fruit of a banyan tree to reveal empty seeds, to show how physical forms arise from an invisible essence. He compares salt dissolved in water to divine truth hidden in appearances. The Katha Upanishad features the story of Nachiketa, who has a meeting with Yama, the god of death, after his father cursed him. Yama hesitates when asked to tell the nature of the soul and the law of rebirth. He teaches the difference between the good and the pleasant, the quest for truth and knowledge of God, and exposes the tree of life. He reveals a spiritual hierarchy and shows a need for right speech and the moderation of desires. He warns that yoga can be both beneficial and injurious. Through the teachings of the Upanishads, seekers are encouraged to transcend the illusions of the material world, or Maya, and attain spiritual enlightenment and liberation. May the hidden truth be unveiled to lovers of Brahman. May the light of the sun inspire a vision of the light of Brahman. May we perceive the distant Brahman as our intimate source. The power behind every activity of nature and of man is the power of Brahman. To realize this truth is to be immortal. Brahman is all. From Brahman come appearances, sensations, desires, deeds. But all these are merely name and form. To know Brahman, one must experience the identity between him and the self, or Brahman dwelling within the lotus of the heart. Only by doing so can man escape from sorrow and death and become one with the subtle essence beyond all knowledge. Since the manifold objects of sense are merely emanations of Brahman, to know them in themselves is not enough. Since all the actions of men are but the phases of the universal process of creation, action alone is not enough. The sage must distinguish between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is of things, acts, and relations. But wisdom is of Brahman alone, and beyond all things, acts, and relations, he abides forever. To become one with him is the only wisdom. The secret of immortality is to be found in the purification of the heart, in meditation, in realization of the identity of the self within and Brahman without. For immortality is simply union with God. Man, in his ignorance, identifies himself with the material sheaths that encompass his true self. Transcending them, he becomes one with Brahman, who is pure bliss. Meditation can be learned, and it must be practiced according to accepted rules. By its means, it is possible to realize the personal Brahman, who, in union with Maya, creates, preserves, and dissolves the universe, and likewise the impersonal Brahman, who transcends all forms of being, who eternally is, without attributes, and without action. The Gayatri mantra is one of the most revered and ancient mantras from the Vedas and interpreted in the Vedanta. It is recited every dawn and dusk by millions of people. Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha Tatsavitur Varinam Bhargo Devas Yadimahi Diyo Yona Prakodayat. Om, earth, sky, stars. We meditate on the supreme light of the source. May the supreme light illumine our hearts and intellects and guide our actions. This mantra is dedicated to Savitur, the sun god, a universal prayer that invokes the divine light of wisdom, aligns with the Vedantic quest for self-knowledge and realization of the ultimate truth. In Vedanta, the goal is to realize the true nature of reality, often referred to as Brahman. Om is an abstract symbolic representation or pratika of this absolute reality. When pronounced, it is believed to encompass three aspects of Brahman. Ahum, represents the waking state, symbolizing the physical realm. U represents the dream state and the mental realm. Represents the deep sleep state and causal existence. The silence that follows Om represents Turiya, the transcendent state of pure consciousness beyond the three states. Om symbolizes the unity of existence by blending the three sounds, Aum, into one vibrational resonance. The Bhagavad Gita is a primary text of Vedanta that is an excerpt from the Indian epic Mahabharata. It consists of a 700-verse dialogue between the warrior Prince Arjuna and Lord Krishna, the incarnation of Vishnu, who serves as his charioteer and spiritual guide. The Bhagavad Gita is often seen as a synthesis of the teachings found in the Upanishads. It expounds the essence of Upanishadic wisdom and presents it in a more accessible form. The Gita introduces the idea of devotion as a path to spiritual realization, which became a prominent aspect of later Vedanta teachings. The Brahma Sutras consist of a collection of aphorisms which serve as a systematic and concise exposition of the core teachings of Vedanta. The aphorisms critically analyze and systematize the Upanishadic teachings, resolving apparent contradictions and ambiguities found in the text. Swami Vivekananda says all the schools of Hindu philosophy start from the Vedanta or Upanishads, but the monists took the name to themselves as a specialty because they wanted to base the whole of their theology and philosophy upon the Vedanta and nothing else. There are three primary divisions of orthodoxy and several methods of knowledge, allowing individuals to gain a deeper understanding of reality and their spiritual journey. Nyaya Vaishika represents a philosophical approach characterized by realism and naturalism. It's concerned with understanding the empirical world through logical analysis and the study of the fundamental building blocks of reality. This division emphasizes the importance of logical reasoning and the examination of the material world to gain insights into the nature of existence. Shamka Yoga is focused on enumeration and psychological insights. It seeks to understand the world by categorizing and enumerating different elements and principles that constitute reality. With Sankhya Yoga, the mind and consciousness play a central role, making it a valuable tool for introspection and self-exploration. Mimamsa Vedanta revolves around the interpretation of sacred texts and scriptures. It emphasizes the importance of understanding and applying the teachings found in these texts. There are also 6 valid methods of knowledge. Pratyaksha refers to direct sensory perception, where individual gathers knowledge through their senses, the most immediate and common source of knowledge. Anumana involves drawing conclusions through inference, either deductive or inductive. By observing relationships and patterns, one can infer hidden truths. Upamana relies on comparison and analogy to gain knowledge. It involves understanding something new by comparing it to something already known. Arthapati is a method of knowledge based on postulation and involves proposing a hypothetical situation or cause to explain a certain effect. Anupalabdhi deals with negation and the recognition of absence. It allows one to understand the non-existence of something. Shabda involves gaining knowledge from the testimony of reliable sources, especially scriptures and authoritative texts. In practical Vedanta, these divisions of orthodoxy and methods of knowledge provide a comprehensive framework for seekers to explore the nature of reality, gain self-realization, and navigate their spiritual quests with reasoned inquiry and the study of sacred texts. Swami Vivekananda said that every philosophy and every system in the world owes much to Kapila, the greatest name in the history of India in psychology and philosophy. The influence of Kapila is everywhere seen throughout the world. Wherever there is a recognized system of thought, there you can trace his influence, even if it be thousands of years back. Yet he stands there, the shining, glorious, wonderful Kapila. In Kapila's Sankhya system, there are two main principles: Purusha, the changeless witness, and Prakriti, the material phenomena subject to three conditions of creation, preservation, and destruction. The first manifestation of Prakriti is Mahat, or intelligence. It is sometimes translated as Buddhi, which in mankind is discrimination or the determinative function. There is no consciousness inherent in it. Consciousness itself, Purusha, independent of mechanical processes, illumines the mind, the senses, and the objects of perception, like the sun is reflected in a jar of water. If the reflection of the sun in a jar of water wobbles, the sun itself does not wobble. It is a false attribution of the ahamkara, or identity-making function. The reflected self is then bound to mental processes, bodily organs, physical conditions, and ruled by attraction and aversion to various objects and experiences. We will explore more about the Sankhya system in later sessions. The Sankhya system is the companion to Patanjali's yogic method, which is a structured approach to overcoming mental afflictions, discerning spiritual truths, and progressing towards self-realization. When integrated effectively, these teachings offer seekers a comprehensive path to spiritual growth and knowledge. We will explore this in depth in a future session. Founded by Madhvacharya, the Dvaita school of Vedanta asserts a strict dualism between the individual soul, Atman, and the ultimate reality, Brahman. It emphasizes the eternal distinction between the two. Madhvacharya's philosophy highlights devotion to Lord Vishnu and the belief in eternal individual souls with varying degrees of proximity to God. Chaitanya, a 16th century saint, is associated with the Dvaita school and Bhakti tradition within Vedanta. This emphasizes devotion to Lord Krishna and sees the individual soul as eternally separate from God, but advocates intense devotion, or bhakti, as the means to attain grace and love. Founded by Ramanuja, the Vishishtadvaita school adheres to a qualified, non-dualistic philosophy. It recognizes an essential unity between the individual soul and Brahman while acknowledging distinctions. Adi Shankaracharya founded Advaita Vedanta, which advocates non-dualism and asserting that the individual soul, Atman, and Brahman are ultimately one and the same. Shankaracharya emphasizes self-realization through the path of knowledge, jnana, and negation of the apparent duality in the world. There are three agreements among these three Vedantic schools. The first is the existence of God. The second is the possibility of knowledge of God. And the third is the cyclical creation and dissolution of the manifested universe. samsara. They all recognize the concept of cosmic cycles where the universe undergoes repeated cycles of creation, preservation, and destruction. In the early 19th century, the Bengali Brahmin Rammohan Roy denounced superstitious idolatry, advocated for Indian emancipation from foreign domination, and promoted social reforms aimed at empowering women and extending rights and opportunities to all classes of society. His exposition on human perfection according to Vedanta and translations of Vedic scriptures were popular in England and America. Unitarian Christians supported his religion of reason, not dependent on priestcraft or revelation, by sponsoring a missionary project that became the Brahmo Samaj, the House of God. According to the real estate trust deed, the property was dedicated to informal meetings without dogma, ritual, or hierarchy. Roy's successor, Debendranath Tagore, established an educational program and required a declaration of belief in monism and ethical vows to join the group. The organization fragmented during the tenure of Kechab Chandra Sen, who deviated from logical Vedanta into sentimental Tantra, including image worship, sacraments, recitations, and other ceremonies. He experimented with asceticism, communal living with disciples, and established a school for the study of comparative religion. He declared himself the prophet of a new dispensation, an avatar of universal religion, an eclectic syncretism intended to resolve theological differences and unite all churches. His numerous critics mocked him as a foolish madman. Swami Vivekananda was a member of the Brahmo Samaj, and he said, "But for Ramakrishna, I would have been a Brahmo missionary." In their first encounters, he was skeptical of Sri Ramakrishna and challenged the Kali temple priest's spiritual authority. But gradually, through testing and experience, his doubt was allayed. The master instructed the young aspirant in religious wisdom and asked the other disciples to accept him as their leader. Sri Ramakrishna informally initiated Swami Vivekananda and 11 others when he spontaneously gave them the ochre clothes that symbolize renunciation. When most of the devotees scattered after Sri Ramakrishna died, a small brotherhood rented a dilapidated house and swore a monastic oath on Christmas Eve, 1886. A few weeks later, Swami Vivekananda presided over a ceremony confirming their vows. Swami Vivekananda left the abbey on a solitary pilgrimage in 1890 and departed for the United States in 1893 with the Bhagavad Gita in one pocket and in the other, The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis. Meanwhile, the Ramakrishna Brotherhood relocated to a different building and learned of his achievements through newspaper articles. Some of his fellow monks disapproved of the reports from America, but they ceased ridicule when Swamiji wrote letters expressing faith in their guru, explaining his plan of campaign, and directing the monastic order. When he returned to India in 1897, he proposed a formal association and acquired land in 1898 for construction of a temple and institutional headquarters. Two legal structures were established. First, the Ramakrishna Math for the training and maintenance of Cenobites, those monks who live communally. Second, the Ramakrishna Mission for public education and social work. In the rules and regulations, Swamiji wrote, "Now the aim is to gradually develop this math into an all-round university." He forbade severe austerities, promoted freedom of thought and action among different individuals with unique temperaments, and advocated for principles in action over personality worship and rituals. There was no process of conversion or homogeneous regimen. Swami Vivekananda said, each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divinity by controlling nature, external and internal. Do this either by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy, by one or more or all of these, and be free. This is the whole of religion. Doctrines or dogmas or rituals or books or temples or forms are but secondary details. We take in all that has been in the past, enjoy the light of the present, and open every window of the heart for all that will come in the future. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotir Gamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace.